Have you ever noticed when a school shooting happens in the US, the media report that the suspect was obsessed with the Columbine event? Why is that the specific gold label that these individuals choose to emulate? Because there are so many to choose from, right? In this video, we are looking at the history of this sensitive topic and its place in American history and culture. Before we begin, we post death and dying related videos every Friday, so if that sounds like your kind of thing, consider subscribing to the channel. Now let's talk school shootings in the US. Now, I'm placing bets that YouTube takes this video down within 48 hours, but let me know in the comments where you're placing your bets at. And also, I understand this is a sensitive issue for many people, particularly those in the US. We will be taking a very frank look at this, so if you can't handle that, click out now. We'll see you in the next video. So this video is not about rehashing the US gun debate. That is a mess, we all know it. There's no point talking about that at this point. No. This video came about from the true crime videos I was watching recently. How over and over and over again, the media reports that a new school shooter was obsessed with the old school shooters, particularly with an emphasis on Columbine. Now, it could just be that the media will grab onto that because they know that will get views and it's kind of what viewers want to hear. But let's say they aren't just cherry picking from the new suspect's internet history and say that they regularly are obsessed with that specific event. I was wondering why. Now, at first I thought, well, it was their first school shooting. But then I quickly remembered the I Hate Mondays girl, Brenda Spencer, back in the 70s who shot up a school. Which made me think, if Columbine wasn't the first, how many more were there before it? School shootings before Columbine. In my lifetime, the past 30-40 years, as someone not in the US, we have seen the international community go from horror, shock, and sadness about school shootings in the US. Then there were more, and the international community was angry, really angry, that nothing was being done. Now we're at the point that we are laughing at the absurdity of the situation, that the greatest country in the world is allowing this to happen on a regular basis. That was in my lifetime. But I guarantee once I show you this, you will go back to the shock and anger that we once had. So most outlets only count school shootings post-Columbine. But this is the Wikipedia page for school shootings pre-Columbine. Now, I know many of you will say, well, a lot of these didn't end up with the death or only one death, or the shooter wasn't going after a bunch of people, they were targeting a specific person. Now, if you're an American, I can understand why you need to tell yourself that. But I think I can speak for the international community here when I say any shooting at a school is abnormal. Guns should not be going off for any reason at a school. No matter if someone was killed or wounded or targeted specifically or randomly, it shouldn't be happening at all. That's not normal. A school shooting is defined as a gun being shot at a school or educational environment. So no matter if you think this list is too long because in some way it doesn't count in your eyes, it doesn't take away from the fact that frankly, This list is fucked up. It's appalling, and as an Aussie, I cannot wrap my mind around that. What the hell do you say to a list like this? This isn't a generational problem. This isn't a modern American culture problem. This is a we've always been this way culture problem. This is a hypocritical culture that says, let's go and civilize the natives of Afghanistan because they shoot girls for getting an education, yet refuse to fix their own dead children problem. In most countries, dead kids is the final line. And I don't mean on a governmental level, I mean on a citizen level. Citizens would be taking up arms to deal with the root of the problem. Citizens would be storming buildings of the NRA. They would die so their kids could go to school safely. But in the US, nothing. A protest, a hashtag, a charity, like it's going to make any difference whatsoever. The Capitol building recently got stormed by angry people. Now, I am in no way saying storm a government building. That would be wrong and bad for your cause all round. But the blueprint is there. There were 46 school shootings in 2022. A single school shooting would be considered a state emergency in any other country. The military would be sent in to help. But in the US, nothing. I get the American people are fatigued by this issue, I really do. But no one is coming to save you. No one is coming to save your children. That is on you, the American people, to rise up and do something about it. The same people that have been brainwashed by your government to think that all enemies are abroad. Now, I am in no way saying the inverse is true, that the shooter themselves is the enemy, because quite frankly, you know your mental health system is virtually non-existent. But I would say the enemy to rise up against would be the gun lobby. Now, no one is saying that would be easy. Yes, people would die. But these are your kids you are fighting for. And isn't every parent always saying they would die for their kids? So that's just my opinion. I'll leave that there. Let's not talk about that anymore. Let's move on, because I have other questions. What's so damn special about Columbine? Now, after taking a look at that list, you've probably spotted why these new shooters nowadays aspire to Columbine status, the death toll. For those too young to remember, on April 20th, 1999, Eric Harris and Dillard Cobold, two Columbine High School seniors, came to school and murdered 13 students, one teacher, and injured 23 others. 49 minutes after they started shooting, they took their own lives in the library, where the majority of victims died. At the time, it was the deadliest shooting at a high school in American history, and was the most covered news story of 1999. Because the death toll was so high, because there were two perpetrators, which was unique, and because of the massive amount of media coverage that these two kids got, many young disenfranchised kids look up to them as heroes or martyrs, however you want to define it. Think about it. Many of us, including those of us overseas, can still remember the names of those two perpetrators, can still remember their faces. So disenfranchised kids since then have thought, well, I can do that too. And with guns easily much more accessible than mental health care, it's very easy to do. But I do have a question. How many school shooters since Columbine can you name? And here's a list of active school shootings since then to jog your memory. Can you name any of them? Because I can't. So the idea of shooting up a school doesn't get you famous anymore. Partly because it's so common, it's cliche at this point, and partly because the media have learnt to shut up when it comes to these situations, so they don't glorify them like they did a wonderful job of doing back in the day. So kids nowadays who think of doing this are not going to be famous as they would like, and they will likely be dead. So they aren't going to be reveling in the pain they caused either. Remember, dead equals not thinking, feeling, having an opinion about anything. And this is another reason why talking openly about death in a constructive way is so important. Because if you know what the outcome actually looks like, i.e. your rotting corpse in the ground, you are less likely to think of it as a positive path to take. Every human being is a blip on the radar, and your fame as a school shooter will be even less than that. Also, most school shooters write everything online many months before they do anything, and every year the US police foil hundreds of plans before they happen. Impact. So now we see that this isn't simply a modern day issue for the US. It's had this issue since institutional education came into existence over there. So I have questions about the impact. So hundreds of kids, around 500, have died in school shootings all up in the country. Thousands more wounded, many more traumatized. But sticking to the fatality figures here. Statistically speaking, there must have at least been one of those dead kids who had fanatical gun-toting parents, right? At least one. And I don't mean general gun owners. I'm sure there are plenty of registered responsible gun owners in the country that are also responsible parents. But like any country, you have your fair share of homegrown nut jobs. Now, I haven't been able to find any stories that would say that a gun fanatic's kid had been killed in one of these shootings, so US peeps, if you can show me a story of that, I'd be really interested to know. Because I would be curious as to whether their kid dying at the hands of a school shooter would change their view on gun control. Now, on one hand, you would think, of course it would. They're a parent who lost their kid. How could they not be moved? But on the other hand, and what I would be willing to bet on, is that someone that fanatical usually has such strong beliefs that it is much stronger than the love for their family, including their kids. Still, if you have an example, please let me know. My other question is this. We, as an international community, see online how the US has created bulletproof backpacks for their kids and pull out bulletproof safe rooms for classrooms. Now, on one hand, you want to keep your kids safe and the laws aren't going to change, so this makes sense. But on the other hand, I read that a safe room costs $50,000 each and won't even contain a whole classroom full of kids. So that sounds like a good business idea. I also have a question about the actual protection of those backpacks. Like, at what point do you just send your kid to school in a bulletproof vest and helmet and be done with it? But that's not my question. Kids are obviously used to this constant threat. They have active shooter drills and they see it all the time on the news. So are these kids being taught about the history of this problem? How many Americans watching this, and I genuinely want to know, knew the history of school shootings went back to the 1700s? Is the history of this issue being taught in sociology or criminology or any other uni course over there? Because finding things for pre-Columbine shootings is not easy. It's there, but you really have to put in the work to find it. And I can only assume that's because the country wants it buried. School shootings are a unique epidemic to the US. Now, it's not to say that it doesn't occasionally happen elsewhere, but it's so common in the US that it's the norm. No one is shocked anymore. And it seems from the outside that no one is really willing to band together and do something that would equal the terror of these events in order to stop it. It is very interesting to look from the outside through a psychological and sociological perspective. And with that, go talk death.